South Park Season 20 has come to an end, and on the whole, this season was a thing that happened. You'd hope that at the end of an entire season of South Park that you'd have a lot to say about it. The show's episodes have traditionally always been pretty hard-hitting with social commentary, with a lot of laughs mixed in as well. But here we are at the end of Season 20, and in a lot of ways, I'm struggling to really think of what to say about it all. It's kind of a weird loss for words that I've never really had towards South Park before, and I think this is due almost entirely to something they did that they've never done before throughout an entire South Park season.
Seasons 18 and 19 of South Park represented a fairly significant turn for the series with the introduction of running plot lines throughout the course of the entire 10-episode season. Season 18 saw things like Randy Marsh as Lord or gluten-free foods, while Season 19 had things like the PC Bros, Caitlyn Jenner, and gentrification. But for the most part, all of those things, while consistently present throughout their seasons, were nothing more than just subplots to what were still mostly standalone main plots for each episode. And in my opinion, that formula was fantastic. It kept true enough to the traditional feel of seasons 1 through 17, but added something new. Something to essentially reward viewers for being there from start to finish of the season. Sure, they weren't perfect seasons, maybe most notably by the messiness of the finale of season 19, but they were still really funny and it felt like a fresh change to things. A slight risk and deviation from the norm that paid off in my book. Season 20, though, took a much bigger deviation from that older formula, sort of in the sense that standalone episodes weren't at all a part of it. And honestly, as much as I hate to say it, it didn't work. Now, don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed a whole lot about this season. The episodes were still funny and I definitely laughed a lot throughout the season. But for the first time ever, I felt like an entire season of South Park was lacking. In previous years, when I've reviewed an entire South Park season, it was easy to go through episode by episode and break them down by their individual plot lines and the current news topics that they aimed to satire. But as I rewatched this entire season, it was even more obvious how there really was only one plot line throughout it all, rather than the 8 or 9 that we'd got the past couple seasons, with one continuous plot line spanning no more than 3 episodes. Here, the story arc centered around internet trolling takes us from the very beginning all the way to the end. And while something like trolling is a perfectly fine topic for a single episode or even a 2-part episode, it's hard to grasp why anyone thought this topic of all topics needed the attention of an entire season. Every episode was essentially just a continuation of the previous one. Even with 2 and 3-part episodes in the past, the second or third parts found a way to feel a little bit more distinct as its own episode as part of a bigger plot. But in Season 20, that just wasn't the case. And I don't mean that in the sense that they tried for them to be distinct and it just didn't work, but more so that they really did seem to intentionally go with a sequential format for the entire season. And that one main plot they chose to go with was only mildly engaging from a story standpoint. And because of that, the individual episodes and really the season as a whole consisted largely of just funny moments sprinkled throughout it all, rather than episodes containing a continual build-up to add value both to the payoff of it all and value to everything that led up to it. Long story short, for the second time over the past 3 seasons, they took a shot at doing something new. And while the shot they took before season 18 was a hit, in my opinion, this one just outright missed. Especially with just how fucked up of a year 2016 was, it's hard not to view this as a huge missed opportunity. Things like an epic standoff between crazed Donald Trump protesters and crazed Donald Trump supporters was something you'd almost expect out of South Park. With all the uproar over fake news lately, you'd expect something like that to have made its way into things. Where was somebody like Bernie Sanders in all of this? Where was Harambe? Fuck, where was Kenny? Almost the only real timely news matter they devoted an episode to was Colin Kaepernick, and in my opinion, they nailed that one. That was a perfect example of what's always made South Park great, but it never really hit hard again past that first episode. Sure, there were a few funny shots at Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and they've essentially morphed Mr. Garrison's character into Trump, but for the craziness that was the entire election as a whole, it still felt like they left a little bit on the table there. And speaking of leaving things on the table, did we just completely forget about the member berries? All their build-up throughout the whole season, and for what? That whole thing is a complete head-scratcher. I did feel like the season premiere and the season finale, for the most part, were both pretty solid episodes. And I did kind of like how much of the focus this season was on the Broflovsky family for a change. Randy and Sharon Marsh have been in the spotlight plenty to where you almost forget how funny Gerald, Sheila, and Ike can be when given an opportunity. But honestly, they maybe were in the spotlight a little too much. And I think that sort of speaks to the overall shortcoming of this season. It lacked the balance that we've come to expect out of South Park. It leaned too heavy towards certain things and in turn sacrificed other aspects that have traditionally made South Park great. It took a chance on something new, but it just missed, and it almost seems like they're acknowledging their mistake with the title of the season finale being The End of Serialization as We Know It. It makes me wonder a little bit where the show is going to go from here. I don't doubt at all that they will rebound very strongly. I think Matt and Trey are definitely passionate about what they do, but I think they're also as aware as just about any other creators out there. They seem very much capable of criticizing their own work and wanting to make it better, but when it comes to Comedy Central's deadlines, they don't quite have the luxuries of delaying things if necessary, like they might have with, say, the release date of a video game or two. But what I'm really wondering is if this means they abandon the running jokes entirely and go back to the way things were before season 18. It very well could be the case, and as much as I enjoyed those new aspects of season 18 and 19, I can just as easily live without it and enjoy South Park for what's always made it great. And to me, what's made it great is hard-hitting social commentary told in clever ways through well-written characters. Season 20 lacked that in a way that no other season before it has, in my opinion. It was still entertaining, but it just didn't have the depth to it that's been the standard of South Park for a couple decades now. If season 20 serves as the reminder of what that standard should be, and season 21 brings a return to glory, I can live with that, because despite all the shortcomings, I still laughed plenty along the way. And if a lot of the current events from 2016 that felt missing from season 20 eventually surface in much grander fashion in the fractured butthole, it'll make everything that much easier to swallow.
Okay, so admittedly for being at a little bit of a loss for words over this whole thing, I guess I did end up with plenty to say about it, but enough about me. I'm curious to know what you thought about season 20 of South Park. I know there's a lot of people out there that didn't at all like the small running subplots that they had throughout seasons 18 and 19 like I did, so I'd be curious to know what they thought about South Park essentially doubling down on that entire formula throughout the entire course of this season. Whatever you thought about it all, whether it's things you particularly didn't like, things you actually did like, or opportunities you felt they missed out on throughout the course of the season, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let's have a conversation about this whole thing. Also be sure to hit that like button, that helps me out a ton. But above all else, everybody, thank you so much for watching the video.